my buddy Dan Abbate. I haven't seen you in a while.
What's up, Joel? How's it going?
Great, man.
Yeah.
You know, you're an interesting cat.
Thank you.
Yeah, you are entrepreneur, philosopher, a fun dude.
Yeah.
I was going to say fun guy because you have a mushroom farm.
I do own a mushroom farm as well.
Fun guy would be good. All right, so married.
Married, yeah.
Kid.
6, 7, 8 was when we got married. So that was going on 16 years now, 17 years, something like that.
That's easy to remember. 6, 7, 8.
That was on purpose.
Yeah, but you could mess up at 5, 6, 7.
That's true. Yeah, that's the only. Yeah, you can shift it.
You can shift it.
Yeah. But I always remember 08 because that was the financial crisis. So
there you go.
He said keep it locked in.
Crisis together.
Exactly.
Yeah, I got a cousin who I think he got married. I was there. It was 10, 10, 10.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
That's a great one. That's
pretty
pretty easy to remember.
Yeah, you can't mess that up.
Just remember the number 10.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Fortunately, now we have calendars in our phone that can
remind you. Yeah.
Yeah.
I always do that when I meet somebody and they tell me what their birth date is. The first thing I do is log it in.
Perfect.
Repeat. And
make sure it repeats.
Yep.
Yeah. I've gotten to the point where sometimes I have to put birthdays and then list the number of people.
Right.
Because it's now 3
so
that
many
same
people. Right.
day. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
Good idea. So man, you really are an interesting guy. You're probably my strangest friend because you're just
I like that. That's
all
a compliment.
these different things. You're super into education.
Yep.
You're very futuristic. You're a philosopher. Talk about that. Like, you've done a lot of schooling.
Yeah. I mean, just like for those that are listening and kind of give some background and to remind you. So I went to college at 15. I moved on campus. I've studied philosophy and business for my bachelor's. After that, I went to University of New Mexico for math and physics, bachelor's level as well. And then I did a master's in finance from Harvard. And now I'm actually in the middle of a program at the University of Edinburgh with a master's in philosophy of science and religion. So I just love that stuff. It's a hobby, frankly. I mean, I'm an entrepreneur and investor, but like for my business, for the things I do to make money. But I think I enjoy that process. It's fun.
Have any of those experiences in education helped you in business, or just
100%?
Yeah,
100%, and not in the way that you would think. It's not. It's or maybe not that you would think, but other people might think. I am not a like go to college for college's sake type person. I'm a like do the things that are important to you and the things that you enjoy, because if you enjoy them, then you're going to get more out of it. And so for me, again, giving kind of like the philosophical background and kind of like the way that I like to think of myself, I look at it like the more information that I put into my head and it kind of like all gets mixed around, it comes out in, surprising and unrelated ways.
You surprise yourself?
Yeah, a lot of times. You know, it's funny, speaking of surprising myself as well, like back in Chicago, we used to own theater venues and I was involved in the improv community and all that. And the thing that I always thought was really interesting about the like pursuit of like improv comedy is that the reason it's fun and interesting for the audience is the same reason it's fun and interesting for the guys on stage, because the guys on stage are equally surprised at what's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
So in a way, life is kind of the same way. And so like you don't really know how things are going to interconnect or intersect with each other. You just have to be open to those things. And I think when you pile a lot of information, for me anyway, a lot of different things into my brain, I start to see like connections between the different things that don't seem to be connected like on the surface, but then when you kind of are like processing them and going through your day in life, you see those connections.
So you're just worrying about putting in the input of data, and then it'll come out in its own creative way that the brain and the back end is manipulating it and feeding it to you. Yeah,
which is kind of interesting because when you think about it, that's kind of a little bit how AI works too, right? Like you just put a whole bunch of stuff in and then you can kind of like, the more stuff you put in, the more perspective it has.
Hopefully you're good at your own prompts in your brain to get them to work.
That's actually a really interesting point. Yeah. I guess you are required to ask what you want out of it. And I see that a lot in like different entrepreneurs and people I've advised and invested with. Or just people are trying to get through life, right? Like that they've got they have these like repeating problems. So like people with repeating problems, I always kind of think are like putting bad prompts in is like a good way to say it, right? Like they kind of keep producing the same result that they don't really want, but somehow they're repeating it.
So. I wonder where that comes from. And you're a philosopher. This might be the person to talk to. I'll give you a simple example where I see people repeating things I'm imagining. I'll go to a restaurant with my wife and I hear someone say like, hey, we need a table that can have a high chair or something. And the hostess or the host, they seem like no one's ever asked them that. I'm sure it's asked multiple times. And I always think this person's drowning. They don't know what to do. They're so confused. It's like, there's got to be a system to this.
Right.
So I imagine if that happens to that person there, people must be repeating
Absolutely.
same problems and not fixing them.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think, like in that example, the person who, well, I think there's also there's a couple things potentially going on there that I kind of think of just from experience, like things that I've read and things that I know. One is there's the whole like time horizon thing. There's kind of a theory about how each person has like the ability to plan, right? And so like CEOs and founders, their time horizon is like 3 to 5 years, 3 to 7 years, something like that. They have to understand how the work they're doing today connects up to 3 to 5 to 7 years from now, because otherwise they wouldn't do anything because it would be too abstract. Yeah. And then you've got other people who are they only see from where they are today to tomorrow or to next week, which is kind of why like people get paid weekly. So like people who get paid weekly and then they spend all their money and then they're like struggling by the end of the next week and they can't ever save and they can't ever like get anywhere because they're just stuck in that cycle of like, this is as far as I can see the work I do today and how it connects to this week. So I think in your case example, with like in the restaurant, that person you described probably, well, either just doesn't care about their job and is like totally checked out, which is also a possibility, or it's possible that they're just somebody who's just like not able to plan ahead. When this happened 3 days ago, they didn't fix it. Yeah. They just went away. Yeah. Right. And so then they're starting over every time. It's like Groundhog Day, you know?
What's interesting about that is that, man, we see it because we're planners or we look at longer term and we think they are working harder.
Correct.
They're addressing the same problem over and over in their life instead of writing a script, whether it's a software or in their brain, where when I hear this, this is what if then, and then this, if this, then.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the thing that's sad about that too is that people who find themselves in that position, again, and it isn't even in that one example, people find themselves in these types of scenarios who are very smart and may have long time horizons too, that also find themselves in similar situations. But whenever we find ourselves frustrated, and we've been frustrated in the same way for the same reasons before, in my experience, just as a human being, I find that that's because I've made a choice to continue to be frustrated. I've made a choice to like continue to do the same things and not make the adjustments. And so that's usually, I look at that as more like that frustration is a sign, is a kind of kick in the ass to like, okay, wait, why is this happening again? How do I make a different choice?
So if you have a situation in your life that frustrates you, what's your go-to steps? What are you doing then?
Yeah,
you can't just erase it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, you got to deal with the situation in the moment, right? Like, unfortunately, like whatever the thing is. But then going forward, there's that kind of self-reflection. I mean, I can give you a good example, like just maybe so it's not abstract. So, as you know, given our, history together, I'm from Chicago. When I moved down to Florida in 2013, I was getting out of a lot of M&A stuff and things I had been doing back in Chicago, and I was doing them in a very specific way. And my mindset was, I have a lot of energy. I'm smart. I can work really, really hard. That's how I'm going to do business, because I'm just going to be smarter and harder working than everybody else. That frustrated me. That made me feel very alone. That made me like not happy in my life. Even when I was successful, I still wasn't happy. Right. And so in that particular example, what I did was I moved to Florida. So anybody who's frustrated, just move to Florida. That fixes
the sunshine
fixes half of it right there. Yeah. So, but anyway, but in also moving to Florida, I also took the time to say, I don't know how I'm going to do this different, but I'm going to do it different. I didn't know what that meant. I just knew I wasn't happy doing it the way I was doing it. So I opened up my mind to the possibility that my belief about me being harder working and smarter than everybody else maybe isn't right. I was open to the idea that I could be wrong. And over time, I actually realized that I was wrong, and that I'm happier, more content, more successful. Outcomes come quicker and better when I'm working with people from a capacity of that, hey, they know that better than I do. Let's let them do that. Hey, I can work hard. I don't really want to work hard. I want to work smarter, and kind of so basically flipping that all around.
You want to quarterback it?
Exactly.
And let
That's the great, yes, exactly. And I didn't know that, back in Chicago, I didn't know that, but I actually very much enjoy quarterbacking. I very much enjoy solving problems, sitting down with everybody as a team, figuring it out, and then saying, cool, okay, go do that.
Yeah. And you're doing that now in your role as what is it? A mentor, an investor, an advisor? What kind of stuff are you doing?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I have a fund now, where we invest in, cash flowing asset backed stuff for the most part. How the fund came about was, the idea of the division of labor in entrepreneurship doesn't really exist very well, especially
got to do it all.
The many hats kind of theory. We put on a lot of hats that, for myself and what I suggest for other people at this point is if you're not, willing to wear that hat forever, don't even put it on. Because we have this kind of like excuse that we make, like, oh, well, there's no one else to wear it, so I'm going to just put it on. Now, the problem when you put it on is that now you're stuck with it. And it's, even if you're successful, especially if you're successful, it's very difficult to get it off because you've built this whole system around the fact that you have this or multiple hats, right? And so, so Clotine, the fund, was built around that idea. Like, okay, so let's try to split up the division of labor within the process of scaling investments, scaling businesses, such that the people who are really the entrepreneurial minded folks that are really good at one side of the equation, let's keep them focused over there. And then the guys who are really good, mainly the, capital inflow side, and then the deployment side, let those guys focus over there. Cause normally they're flip flopping back and forth. So do
you guys fill the gap for each one based on their needs?
Yeah. And kind of just by building the system that they can all live in. Right. And so the administrative side of it is, of course, the fun, like the actual compliance and like dealing with all the accounting and taxes and all the, kind of like numbers side of it. And then on each side of the equation, you got the guys who are really good at capital inflow and you got the guys who are really good at deploying. And then you just kind of scale those guys up together next to each other, right, as we go along. And
do those guys, the entrepreneurs within the fund, one's running this business, one's running the other one, are they working together in any way?
There is some cross. If operationally, if it makes sense, they will do business with each other, but they do business with each other independently of like the fact that they're related. To avoid the vertical integration problem, they're not required to deal with each other. So if they see that they're getting the best deal from a sister business, they can do that. But there's no requirement that they should.
Sure.
And so I think that's so anyway, the point is a lot of this kind of philosophical stuff that we're kind of like talking about actually gave birth to the current business model that I've been operating. And even before that, what kind of led to that was the advising and coaching and investing I had done just kind of on a onesie twosie basis, which probably that onesie twosie basis was, if you include like accelerators and stuff, probably 100+ different companies and different entrepreneurs. Again, putting all kinds of information in, not knowing what you're going to get out. Well, what I got out was this fund structure, which is making everyone more successful than they would have been on their own. And
you didn't sit down from the beginning when you were getting all these inputs, coaching and mentoring and all that. Yep. You were just, this is awesome. It's cool. I'm learning. It's fun. And maybe make some money. Yep. And then it just one day or little by little, this fund idea happened.
I think it was little by little. I was doing all the coaching and advising stuff and then ultimately investing into some of these people from a place of, I like these people. I want to see them successful. And it was all about them. Like I want people to do well. And then, like you said, it was just a little by little that I all of a sudden started to realize like a pattern of watching people who were not succeed. Even the ones that were not succeeding, I actually learned a lot about why they're not succeeding.
Yeah, don't do that.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. Like, well, this is the problem that they're having, or they've got so much energy and so much dedication, but it's applied in the wrong direction. And that goes back to that idea of choice or changing your perspective. I see it all. And sometimes they won't. Like even when I've pointed it out to them, and you probably know, you've probably in your experience too, you keep pointing it out to them. You're like, hey, this is why this is happening.
Those are the people that answer with, yeah, but.
Yes, exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So a couple of, and you know these folks, but so I won't say names or anything, obviously, but a few people that I've mentored in accelerator type things. I think you know both of these people. They had horrible businesses. The margins were garbage. They were working really hard. They were stressing. They were super smart, both of them. And I could not convince them by showing them their P&L, putting percentages next to the numbers, percentage of sales, and showing them, look, your gross profit is 22%. Right. Your net profit is nothing. And even if you wiped out a bunch of your expenses, this is not a good product. No, I just need to sell more of it. You're just digging a deeper hole.
Right.
And it's funny how sometimes sad, well, it's not funny, it's sad. They don't understand their financials enough where, they tell me the sales and the losses every year. And I say, well, you can't just keep losing money. And but I'm still afloat. Then let me look at your balance sheet. I bet you there's debt increasing because how else did you fund this? And when I show them their balance sheet, we pull it up. They go, oh yeah, my debt keeps going up. Right. And even then you can't convince some folks. So those you don't invest in, obviously.
No, right. And actually, what's interesting about it, what I suggest, I think that operating entrepreneurs, people who start from an operations perspective as opposed to a finance perspective or an investment perspective, I think could benefit heavily from some formalized kind of finance. I don't want to call it education, but education, right?
Boot camp.
Yeah. It could just be a boot camp thing, just to kind of like there's a couple points like that you just made. So first is the idea of like opportunity cost, right? Those people that you're talking about are super smart, super energized, great people, and they could probably go get a job working for somebody else, making way more money than they're ever gonna make in the thing that they're doing, right? So like they've got to think about that. They also have to think about what an investment is. An investment is an investment. It doesn't really matter. That's what I love about kind of like the finance and investment side of things is that money doesn't care how hard you worked or how much passion you have or how much vision you have. It really only cares like I put the money in for this long and I got this return. And you can do that in multiple different ways. And the only difference between one way from the next is kind of risk, right? How much risk one way or the other you're looking at. Otherwise, it's all the same. It doesn't really matter. And so I think when it would benefit many entrepreneurs to know and to think like that, because it'll keep them out of the trouble that you're describing of like, hey, I've been banging my head against the wall for 10 years. What a waste of time. Like it's a bad investment. And sometimes they think just because they're not losing money, like, oh, well, we're profitable. Yeah, but your opportunity cost or that's the other side. Your opportunity cost is way greater than your profit you're making. So you should be doing something else. Or they look at it like their sunk cost, meaning like
they're in too deep.
I've been in for 10 years. If I just go another 2 years, I'm going to get where I want to go. And like, they're not thinking like that. You know,
they're throwing bad money after bad money.
And time after bad time after bad time.
That's right. So not as much, I'm not as interested in what types of businesses you're looking for, but tell me what kind of entrepreneurs you like.
Yeah. Well, that's a good question. I can describe my my one business partner up in North Carolina. We just did a deal with a multi-billion-dollar private equity company. We sold and then recapitalized with them. So now they have essentially a blank check to go out and do acquisitions. They're gonna kill it over the next few years. So what type of entrepreneur is that? It's somebody with a strong vision of where they want to go. And thinking of Michael, he knows I'm talking about him. Like I could say his name. Michael and his wife, Ashley, who are fantastic. They're super awesome. They're both great entrepreneurs in different ways, why they're great. But the key to both of their success is their willingness to look at the situation that's happening right now and then make those adjustments. I think I met them 4 or 5 years ago now, originally. And to see the growth that they've had, both of them as entrepreneurs and as leaders is like tremendous. And it's not because like they set out to do that. They just, it's like they were led by the need at the time. They didn't go like, oh, I'm going to go to like learn leadership or I'm going to go learn accounting, whatever. It's like they recognize where they were running into kind of like problems or roadblocks. And then they were making all the little adjustments the entire time. Wow. So it wasn't just about doing the work. It was about like upgrading their mindset. Wow. And I would say that they did that like consistently for the last 4 or 5 years.
And the most interesting part about that is one husband or one wife, they could do that. They're both simultaneously growing like that together.
Yeah. Which is also, that's an amazing thing in itself. Just the fact that they've been doing that. And they have complementary skill sets. Like they've succeeded the way that they've gotten to so far, and they will continue to, because they definitely have complementary skill sets, which I've seen that type of husband-wife scenario in the past, where the complementary aspects of how they are is not as aligned. That's a tough spot to be in too. That might be something that those couples should look at and say like, okay, well, actually you might not be my best business partner. My wife, Kelly, and I were in that scenario for the longest time, where we realized, like, my wife actually said to me one day, she's like, I want to be your wife, but I don't want to be your business partner anymore. And she was 100% right in saying that, because although we were successful, she wasn't happy, and we really weren't aligned in the growth and where we could go.
Was it she wasn't happy with her job in the business or dealing with you every day? What was it?
Yeah, it was probably that because she was like my second banana, if you want to call it that. So she was kind of being forced into like roles that she didn't really want to be in, and she could do, but it wasn't her passion. It wasn't really what she liked to do. It stressed her out more than like somebody else who it wouldn't stress out at all. And then I was requesting things of her, and then she was requesting things of me that neither one of us really wanted to provide within the business. And so when she said that, this was probably like 2017 or something like that. I can't remember the exact, year, but, it really set me off on a path where I'm like, oh, that was another part of my journey, right? Of like looking at things and doing things differently, to like know that, I need to go find those things in other people, not just who's right around me.
And now she runs her own business, and she's happier doing that.
Yeah. She's been doing the same thing for as long as I've known her, like 20 years in different capacities. And, she's got it set to the right level that she wants to do it at. So she's been a grant writer for nonprofits for 20 years, and she's got, a good group. She's got a list of clients that she's had one of them for like the whole 20 years. And then she's got a list of people who are trying to work with her that she's like, okay, I'll put you on the list, and when I have time, I'll work with you. So,
and it works for her. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about one day we were together with a group of guys, and this is in the beginning of COVID, or right when it was going, and we were just getting back to seeing people in person. Mm-hmm. We're in Florida, so we got to do that earlier than most places. And we happened to be standing in this room, and it was you and I and our friend Chris, and then everybody else was on the other side. And someone said, hey, I was going to ask how everybody is, how they feel about COVID, but we've kind of already set ourselves up that way, that we were here, we didn't have a mask on, we weren't so worried. Right. What was your thoughts, early on, or did it change?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, So the whole COVID experience for me was enlightening, I guess is a good way to say it. I've never been a political person. I've never paid attention to kind of like what the government was up to. It was more of just like I was kind of like, from a policy perspective, I was mostly in the middle, like, conservative on some things, a little more liberal on others, like whatever.
I think of you kind of like a libertarian.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I can go wherever it makes sense, where there's more freedom. Yeah. That's where I'm going to go.
And less government in your
government
pocket.
Bureaucracy. Yeah. I don't want government stuff. I don't. Yeah. I'm very much. I don't like telling people like that it's my way or the highway, and I don't want anyone else telling me that it's their way or the highway, right? And so COVID was like it became very clear to me. I mean, you and I talked through that whole experience because we were together a lot at that point. And I think we both had the same reaction early on, which was like, this doesn't make sense. Like there's too much, what seemed to me was just an effort to grab power, basically. Right. And it seemed very deliberate, and like, and regardless of what anybody would say or think about, why it happened, it did happen. And then the reaction to it was, okay, cool. We're going to grab everybody's everything. We're going to lock everybody in their house. We're going to tell them what to do. We're going to make sure people can't go to work. And then we're going to start to cherry pick, right? Like, oh, you can't go to work, but you can.
Yeah.
Or this business can be open, but this business can't be open, right?
Yeah.
And so like all of that stuff just didn't add up based on the story that was being told. And so...
and that's important to real quick state what, like, for example, you couldn't go to a church and sit next to somebody, but you can go on an airplane and sit next to someone. You couldn't go to a small, maybe boutique, but you can go to Walmart and the big, powerful stores.
Exactly. Who had the lobbyists to be able to control all of it, right? So and now, I mean, you probably saw the House subcommittee on the COVID thing release this like 500-page report, which, and I encourage everyone to go read it for themselves, it basically just said all of the things that we thought were like going on from a conspiracy perspective and that were being like told, oh no, that's a conspiracy. Oh, what's wrong with you? All true, right? Yeah. Like all of it was true. And not only was it true, but it also like showed that the government, our government, the US government, was actively involved in the whole entire origination, the cover up, all of the, the like unconstitutional things that were put in place because of it. And in my opinion, and I don't have a solution for this, but this is just the way I think about it. If you cause a problem, you then can't use the problem for your own benefit. And that's exactly what they did, right? They used the problem that they created.
Like the mafia does.
Like the mafia. Break
the windows, your window,
and then they fix it, right?
We'll pay you pay us, and we will.
Exactly, right? So that's exactly what happened, 100%. And then everyone could be like, oh, well, it wasn't because of some, well, who did it? I don't care who did it. The fact is it happened. And so if it did happen, what is like the downstream, I would say, like punishment or effect to make sure that it doesn't happen again? And so here's a good example. This is the example I always use. So like an actual thing. So we shut down all the businesses, right? Shut down all the businesses. Great. Bunch of them went out of business because they couldn't survive being shut down. And then the ones that did survive got EIDL loans, the economic disaster loan things from the SBA, which everyone was patting themselves on the back. Oh, we're getting this money out to the people, which by the way, they didn't need it until you shut them down. Yeah. So this wasn't like a natural disaster. The EIDL loans are supposed to be used for natural disasters and like acts of God and all that. This wasn't that. And now it's really not that, given that we know that it came out of like things that the government was up to. It wasn't an accident. It was like a thing that they were doing, right? So then they use these disaster loans, hand them out like candy. Half of it just goes overseas and is gone. They don't even know who or when. Yeah, fraud. The other half that still remains on the books, it's something like, and someone can check it if they want, but it's something like 37% are delinquent. So those aren't getting paid back, right? So so if you look at it that way, so a third of a half essentially, so let's call it 25% remaining of the original 100% EIDL loans that were given, 25% are currently being paid. So if those are being paid, my question is, why do those people have to pay those? Yeah. Because all of this was all set up from the beginning. So the government, the guy who broke the windows, is now the guy that these people have to pay back these loans for the next 30 years. So like, I feel like that's kind of like a scam, right? Because you basically like created this kind of indentured situation with all of your small businesses. I mean, I guess it's mostly small businesses that now have to pay all that stuff back. And that's just like a direct correlation, right? Like, broken window, now we have to pay this thing for 30 years. The other example of that is all the inflation and all the crap that we're dealing with now that hits everybody, right? Yeah. So everybody's going to have to pay that back now. Again, things caused by the government. One of the things that I'm excited about, I mean, without getting too political, is, and going back to the libertarian thing, I love the Doge thing with Elon and Vivek.
Cut that waste.
Get rid of it. Like, you know what I mean? Like we've all been to the DMV. Yeah. We know that it's inefficient. We know that there's no motivation for them to become more efficient. It's just all nonsense. So just think of that at all these different levels. The federal government, in my estimation, needs to go back to doing the basic stuff. And that is it. Because then, and that's the thing that I always argue with like liberal friends of mine, right? They're always like, well, we're afraid that Trump's going to do this or so-and-so's going to do that or blah, blah, blah. And I'm like,
take it away.
Take it away. Yeah. Make sure that he never has the power to do anything.
Let the state do it.
Exactly.
Because you have a better chance of going to your state's capital and being heard than Washington, D.C.
Right.
Because your state might have 10 million people in it, but your capital in the D.C. has 300 million.
And the states are decentralized by design from our founding fathers 200 and some years ago, whatever it was. And I don't know if they did this on purpose or not, but they essentially created a capitalistic approach to government by having 50 states the way that we do. I mean, it wasn't 50 at the time, but you get the idea. 50 states, because each state now can make its own decisions, build its own system, and then the ones that are succeeding the most win because people start to migrate to the better states, right?
You just have to hope that the ones who migrate don't bring the policies that didn't work from the...
Right. And if that happens though, then it shifts again. It keeps adjusting. It's all like, it happens kind of organically. The problem that I see too is that like the bigger you get and the more centralized you control, like you create centralization either in economics or like governmental control or whatever. No one person or centralized organization can make good decisions or like there's like, you need to have this distributed system, which is why the internet works, which is why all these kind of AI models and everything work. Cause you have all of this distribution happening and then the best things coming to the top. It's not just one person making a decision.
Well, the perfect example, I think in the Soviet Union, it was called the Politburo, which was like their Congress or something. And I learned this in a price theory economics class.
Yes.
And the professor was phenomenal. And he gave us an example. We were all kids and we had little experience of the Cold War because we were all kids during that time. And he said, here's why socialism, communism doesn't work and capitalism does. And he says, let's pretend in Moscow, there is a guy on the corner with a little hot dog cart. And he is not allowed to decide for himself how many hot dogs he can have in his cart. But he knows that on Mondays, if they would let him do it, he would have 50 because that's his hottest selling day. But he knows Tuesdays are weak. He would only bring out so many because why are you going to open the pack, waste it, put it in the water, wait until Monday to do that? But no, that's not how it's decided. It's some bureaucrat who's never eaten one of those hot dogs or been to his cart who's going to decide for him. So the DMV, I mean, well, those are on state levels, but still, it's very big.
Yeah.
It's very big as opposed to the guy who could run that little private DMV.
Exactly.
He would know how many people to have. He would give better customer service because in the end, he wants to make some money.
Exactly. People are going to be self-motivated. That's the other thing too. People, you're 100% right. Economics is a force of nature. Like people kind of think that it's something you can kind of like tweak and like you can make decisions about. At the end of the day, we can study it the same way we would study biology or study something like that. It's not something that we can say like, well, we've got better ideas on how the hot dog guy should make his like hot dog inventory schedule. You can't make that decision for the hot dog guy. The market's going to decide it. The situation on the ground is going to decide it. And you know what? It's going to be different from block to block to block.
Yeah.
There's no way to make some sort of standardized thing. It'll be slightly different. And people, so the idea of centralization, in my opinion, of anything is always a bad idea. And now there are going to be situations that you can't avoid it to some degree, like you're talking about like defense and things like that, where it really does make sense that probably there's centralized defense for the U.S. is probably a good idea.
50 small armies aren't as good as one big army.
Right. But even that, there's got to be like checks and balances and controls on that system to make sure that it doesn't get out of control. Like government in general is and here's the other thing that I thought about a lot since kind of the COVID stuff. Government only exists because of they have the monopoly on violence, right? The only reason that they're able to do it. And I think people who are from especially from a liberal perspective, they always approach things from, well, we're trying to help people. Mm-hmm. Well, you're trying to help people by utilizing a tool that's only final result is the use of violence on the people who don't agree with them, right? So you're kind of like walking on both sides there by saying like, well, we're trying to help people because we really care about them, but we're going to use the most deadliest thing that as human beings we have, which is government, to enforce doing good. Which
and if you're not clear on that, remember, they can kick down your door, they can slam you on the ground, put you in handcuffs, and put you in jail.
Exactly.
So that's violence.
Right. That's 100%
and they
violence.
come in.
Yeah, and they're the only ones allowed to do that. Like no one else is allowed to do that within the country. That's like the social contract that we all have, that they are allowed to do that. it's a protection racket, basically at the highest level. We pay taxes and they maintain order, right? And that they're the ones who are allowed to do those things. And that's fine. That's a good system. But that system can get corrupted and go completely out of control. And so that's why it's our job, I think, as citizens and as people who are planning, what the future looks like for our country, is to make sure that there's checks and balances. I didn't make those words up. To keep an eye that it doesn't get out of control,
Absolutely. Talking about that they can't centralize what's best for the market. The market has to decide that. Just look at gas stations. The reason you think about why does gas fluctuate so much? I remember explaining this to my kids before, and I say, because look how convenient that gas station is. It's on the way off the highway. It's the very first one right there. And if you're low on gas and you got off,
right,
you're going to go to that one, and it's so high. But keep going 3 more blocks. That one's like 10 cents cheaper. Right. The market's going to decide based on these things. Imagine if we tried to control all of that. That would not be so good.
Yeah.
So talk to me about the investments that you make in these companies. What are they needing? Is it some of the support you give them? Do they need a lot of cash?
Yeah. So the way that the fund is structured, like the fund investing would be different than some of the way that maybe my own personal like operating company investing goes. But either way, both end up kind of being the same. I want to invest in companies and or businesses of various types that are scaling, right? I want to be, I'm not a startup entrepreneur anymore. I'm not a VC guy, like waiting for like a 100,000x return on, my first few dollars in. I want to look at something that on a spreadsheet, we can figure out what dollars we need and what we're projecting is going to go and happen in the future. So for example, within our kind of 3 verticals that we have right now that are underneath the fund, those 3 verticals, we could probably take in multi-billions of dollars without having to do anything more than those 3 verticals. Like they are very scalable. Capital is the constraint. So we just keep feeding more capital in and they just keep getting bigger and bigger.
And are these mostly product businesses?
No, these 3 in particular. So one is private credit. So like hard money, basically for real estate and some operating business support, like through, we'll do AR financing or lines of credit and all that sort of stuff. So private credit is one side. Horizontal land development. So from basically raw land through finished lots that we then sell to builders as, so they can, and we can talk about like the housing shortage and why that is, because I've done a lot of, research on that recently. So horizontal land development. And then we also do financing for a particular tax strategy where you've got investors who are investing at a particular point and we're providing kind of like some extra resources from a leverage perspective to kind of maximize those returns. So those 3 things are all just pump more capital in, you get more results. The land business is a little bit more operational, but it's not operational in the same way that like a service business is or a manufacturing business.
On that land, are you preparing it through the stages to get it sold to a developer?
Exactly. Like the goal is to start at raw land or somewhere in that early stage, go through all the zoning, all the political stuff, which also causes, by the way, a housing shortage because we're talking,
red tape.
Red tape, which is a restriction on the market. The market is demanding and we can't deliver it fast enough.
The price has to go up.
Price goes up. Exactly. Same thing. So, we go from raw land through, eventually to get full entitlements with construction drawings, and we will go all the way through construction. So like our project in North Carolina, which was the first one for that business. I mean, that's if we jump out at paper lots, which is fully entitled, and then somebody can take it from there, that's, $30 to $40 million sale. And then if we take it through construction, you're probably looking at another, $100+ million.
Would you be on the hook on that construction? You'll partner with
the construction, we would go through the whole construction process. Yeah. So we'd raise the money. And then, at that point we're working with institutional, big guys even bigger than us. So we'll probably bring in the equity side, and then we'll bring in the debt on, Wall Street guys. That sort of thing.
Are you enjoying that?
Yeah. You know why I'm enjoying all of it is because this is the first thing that I started where I, from the get-go, didn't put on any hats that I didn't want to wear, because I normally always would just put the hats on and then get to work. And then I'd get stuck with a hat I didn't want or multiple hats I didn't want. In this case, I just said, I'm not going to put a hat on, even if it just sits empty, like, hey, this thing has to get done. Like, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to
Get
find the
somebody.
right person to do it from the get-go immediately. And so consequently, I have a fantastic team. Everybody's great. I love every one of them. And I don't do anything that I don't want to do, that I'm not the highest and best person to be doing it.
Yeah, and it took a while to get you there.
Oh, yeah.
And to learn about yourself.
I'm 44 years old. I started when I was 14. So I would say that it's, it's been 30 years. To get that far.
Yeah.
So
that's fantastic.
And that was all mindset. That wasn't like 30 years of like cranking away and like building the business and all these things. It was 30 years of adjusting mindset to get there.
It's so powerful,
the
way we think. So what's your life like now? I know years ago you had your head down, you're cranking away. Mm-hmm. Can you delineate the difference between work and play? What are you doing now with your days?
Yeah, that's a good question. My schedule's really open. I really don't have any standing meetings on my schedule at all. I have a templated schedule that I know I've shown to you in the past.
Education time.
Yes, exactly. You remember it. Yeah. So I have a templated schedule for my like perfect week. And I about once a year, probably maybe a little less than that, but about once a year, I always look at that template and make sure like, does this still fit the way that I want to be? And I would have like, 8 a.m., to 9 exercise. And I didn't define what that was. I just, exercise Monday through Friday or whatever it was. And I would just kind of lay out my templated schedule. And then over the years, since I've been doing that, I've kind of kept adjusting it, because really what that thought process was based on is that, entrepreneurs, again, are willing to work hard. So a lot of times what they do is go, oh man, I'm working 70 hours a week. And then I always ask them, why don't you work 80 hours a week? And they're like, no, that's crazy. When would I sleep? And I'm like, well, you just chose 70 hours randomly. You could have chose 80, or you could have chose 60, could have chose 30. And so that was kind of the logic with the templated schedule. And so I honestly just kept reducing and restricting that number down to the point where now I have nothing standing on my schedule. I have no standing meetings. I'll plug in only what I try. I mean, sometimes for other people's benefit, I will plug in things afternoon, but for the most part, I keep everything before noon. And I also take a CrossFit class at 10 a.m., which basically goes 10 a.m. plus showers, like 11:30. So basically my work availability is essentially like 8 a.m. to just before 10 a.m. and maybe the half an hour before lunch. And then that's kind of it. Like, that's nice. Like, I try to just, everything fits in that. And most of the time I have total flexibility on like a full day. Like, that's just kind of where I plug stuff in.
And whether it's direct or indirect as a consequence of you changing your schedule like that, without saying the actual numbers, but what impact has come about over the years on your income and net worth compared to when you had your head down working really hard and now where you're not working that much?
Yeah. No, my net worth and income is 10x what it was when I came from Chicago. And I wasn't doing too bad when I came from Chicago, right? Like I was doing well. I believe that with this structure, and I don't want to be like, I guess I could just call it out here, with the structure that I have, the people that are working with me will all be, 10 million type net worth in the tens to 100 millions in net worth. I think I can get to $1 billion in this structure. And I think all the people around me can get to tens and $100 million as well, like as far as their net worth goes. And I would have never been able to believe like that was possible, because I never felt like I had the vehicle to get there, or let alone get my friends there, right? The people who are with me to get us all there and have the structure for us to do it together. I think we can get there for sure. And more importantly, not only do I think we can get there, but I could think we can do it in a way where we enjoy each other's company, where we've got that good kind of life, work-life balance. I don't look at investors as customers, but I look at them as additional partners, because without them, we can't do anything. And without us, they can't do anything. Mm-hmm. So we're definitely partnered. So, and I think all of our investors, are also getting where they want to go in their lives through this, mechanism that we've built.
So what's the name of the fund and how do people look it up?
The name of the fund is Clotine, Clotine, Clotine Capital Fund. And yeah, they can, if you Google it or you go to clotinecapital.com, there's a website. It's pretty basic. We're expanding all of our kind of PR and brand building stuff right now. So there's going to be a lot of stuff going out. as we go along here. Once we close this deal in North Carolina, that's going to be a big shot in the arm. So we'll be able to spend some real money on putting ourselves out there.
Yeah, make it fancy.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned something when I asked you some of the things you wanted to talk about. You mentioned OnlyFans.
Yes.
You making a lot of money there?
No, but I'm jealous.
Yeah,
I'm
amazing.
jealous.
Some feet pictures and they're making millions.
You know how it is. Like you click on stuff on YouTube or Instagram and then it starts showing you more stuff. So you see one hot girl and you click on it and now all of a sudden all you have are hot girls on your thing, which is fine. Mm-hmm. But what I've noticed about the model, which I think is just fantastic, is that, and I would assume that there's a whole e-commerce team that sits behind most of these women. But it doesn't look like that. It just kind of looks like it's this girl who's like talking to the camera and like, hey, how's it going? Blah, blah, blah. Because what they're able to do is they're able to build a whole audience in the like suitable for work world, like the just like plain old YouTube world. They build a whole audience. They do funny things. They ride skateboards. They go on a boat. They do all these things that aren't necessarily OnlyFans, whatever, but you just really, they showcase the personality. They showcase like kind of like any other vlogger or somebody that you'd be interested in. But then there's always like that little element and you're like, wait, let me just click the link up here to see.
She seems like she'd do more.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And so I think that's an amazing like exercise in like psychology and like marketing and the way that they do all these things. And then the numbers that these girls are talking. I mean, I should have remembered like the specific names so I can shout them out, but I don't remember, but you can look it up yourself. But I'm not joking. These girls are doing like 20, 30, $40 million a year in revenue off of subscriptions, which of course is like talking about a good business, right? Man. Subscription so that's 100% gross margin at that point, right? They have to spend it on their marketing.
The same work for 10 customers as 10,000 customers.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's unbelievable the amount of money that they and probably a small team can execute and pull through. So that's, and it's the same thing for OnlyFans, right? That as a platform, it's a distributed content place, just like YouTube or just like any of those other places. But they kind of took the whole, I mean, you can do other things on OnlyFans as well, but they took kind of like the porn world and then just flattened it and distributed everything amongst the content creators, just the same way as like new media has like destroyed the dinosaur media, right? And they flattened and distributed that amongst everyone. So it's just, I think it's interesting. And I don't think that business gets enough credit because of what it is. It kind of really how innovative it was and a way of kind of applying these other things that have happened in other industries to that industry, which is a huge industry, right?
Yeah. I wonder, before I sold my company a couple of years ago, I remember it was starting to get tough finding employees. And part of it was they were printing money and giving it to people to stay home.
Right.
But then I heard that the other part of it were people were doing jobs that weren't even jobs before. So they didn't want my warehouse job if they could make money on OnlyFans, Uber Eats, Grubhub, all the different new jobs that exist out there. I wonder how many people have been taken out of the job market because of OnlyFans.
True. Yeah, absolutely.
It just disappeared.
Yeah. And I mean, that's what happens, right? When, and you talk about AI too. When AI comes in and starts taking things over, everybody freaks out. I gave a talk in 2015 at a TEDx conference in Boca about how not to be replaced by a robot. And but it happens in every cycle where there's like a new technology that's disruptive. People find new ways of providing value. As humans, we're kind of built to provide value. And it goes back to that economics being like a force of nature. You can't stop the fact that a person wants to provide value for another person in whatever way that is. And that's why when you create these artificial mechanisms that kind of that screw up people working together, it creates black markets, it creates supply shortages or, all these different things. And so if there's demand, someone will figure out how to fill it. Yeah,
absolutely. Anything else that you'd like to share? We already talked about Clotine, right? The website. Anything else? Where are you on social media?
Yes, I am on social media. The Big DA is probably the best way to find me. If you search for the Big DA, I'm on Instagram. Although I need to update. I actually got to do some more Instagramming. But yeah, there's a lot of good stuff coming.
And now that you said the big DA, that's Dan Abbate, you reminded me of the world record that my son Adrian is really into world records. And when he was a little kid, every year we'd buy him the big book and he'd always be looking stuff up on the internet. And I don't remember, I think it was in the book.
Oh, for sure it was in the book.
You were in the book. Yeah. What was your world record?
So I was in the what do they call it now? The Guinness, they call it the Guinness Book of Records. I was corrected once by the Guinness people to say it that way. The Guinness Book of Records. I think it was 2013 or 2012. I can't remember which one it was. I was in there for the world's largest commercially available hot dog. We started selling this big hot dog online. So it was the world's largest commercially available. It was 7 pounds, 16 inches long with a 4-inch diameter. It came with a big bun, ketchup and mustard. Was it a gag gift or was it a it actually was good. It was like made by like a real sausage maker who actually sold his place and is now retired and just happens to live like 20 minutes from me. He's like my only good buddy from Chicago that still lives like close to me or whatever. So I see him quite a lot. Shout out to Kurt.
What was the name of that? What was the branding for that hot dog?
It was just bighotdog.com.
Oh,
it was literally just, it was like
an OnlyFans.
Right, yeah.
Big hot dog. That's what you should. Do you still own the domain?
I do still own the domain.
Then you got to start an OnlyFans.
It
Yeah, the big hot dog. Now you got to have a big hot dog. That's the only thing. Yeah, it's funny when I showed my son that, I go, look at my friend Dan and you like records. He goes, I've read about that. I've seen that picture.
Yeah.
That was pretty neat.
Yeah, he probably also, they did a whole, we were really focused. They did videos of us.
Yeah.
We were on the Modern Marvels. Millions of people saw us on Modern Marvels.
That's right.
It was just, I was on the cover. I was on the cover because our friend David saw, he was shopping at Costco and he saw me on the cover of the Guinness board game.
Oh,
there was like a board game and I was like on there.
He did share that. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I just heard about I'm always late on news because I don't watch any news. And yesterday I saw an old thing on YouTube and I asked my wife, she goes, you didn't know this? Remember the hiccup girl?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So she got claim to fame similar to you with the hot dog. She ended up killing somebody.
Oh, no.
And she's in jail for life in Florida.
No.
Yeah, I just learned this. It happened more than 10 years ago, but I just learned that. So hopefully your fame just limits to the big hot dog.
Yeah, no, I don't have any murderous tendencies that I know of. So.
Good. All right, man. It's been great. We hadn't talked in a little while. Although, wait, I wrote myself a note here so I wouldn't forget. I want to thank you because without sharing the details, because I can't, I went, I advise people all day and I'm talking to people and I'm helping them and it's the joy of my life. And I hope to do this the rest of my life. But one day I was going through something and I think I reached out to you. This is maybe a year ago. And I told you what I was going through. And I don't think I shared it with hardly anybody else, but I called you or I asked you if we could set up a call. And I told you what I was going through. And you asked me this is like a 4-minute call that took all my stress away. Because I told you, hey, here's what's happening right now. And you said, okay, well, let me just get clarity. You asked the question, I answered it. You asked the question, I answered it. Maybe a third question. And I was like, Dan, you just solved my stress, man. It is gone in like a 4-minute call. So I got to say thank you. I know I thanked you that day, but man, I owe you a big one because that is, you got rid of all my stress in one phone call. And when that stress starts to creep in my mind, I go back to our phone call. And it goes away. And now it's not coming up very often, but every few months I'll think about it, goes away.
It's all about the mind, right? Like it's just a mindset.
And having the right person to ask you some questions. You didn't even have to give me much advice. You just asked some great questions and you led me in the right direction. So thanks for that.
Of course.
Yeah. And thanks for being here
with me. It's always good to see you, bud.
Likewise.
Yeah.